Good evening, this is Keith All, and tonight I want to explain to you what are absolute and relative cell references in Microsoft Excel. And at the end of the explanation, I will be showing you examples in Microsoft Excel 2003 because that's the version I have. I will be upgrading soon to 2013 Office products, but what I'm about to explain to you will also be okay in future versions of 2003, which would be 2007, 2010, and of course the latest version is 2013. So what are cell references in Microsoft Excel? Well, a cell reference identifies the location of the cell or group of cells in the worksheet. A cell reference or cell address, as it sometimes is referred to, consists of a column letter and also a row number. And when you're referring to a cell reference, you will always list the column letter first, followed by the row number. So for example, once you click on an individual cell within Excel worksheet, it will show up as either A5 or O34, which means that it's column A, row 5, or in this example, column O, row 34. So what is an absolute cell reference as opposed to a relative cell reference? Well, an absolute cell reference is a cell reference that does not change when you copy and paste a cell reference to another cell. In other words, an absolute cell reference in a formula will stay fixed on a specific cell. Now, an absolute cell reference consists of a column letter and a row number that is used in a regular cell reference. However, the difference is both the column letter and row number are preceded by $signs. So examples are, as you can see on the screen, is $C, $4, or $G, $32, or $P, $40. Again, going back to the first example listed here, $C means it's column C, $4 means it's row number 4. So what are relative cell references? Well, relative cell reference, again, consists of a column, letter, and a row number. But however, when you copy that cell reference to another cell, it will change that cell reference. So example of a relative cell reference when you're clicking on a particular cell in a worksheet would be C4, G32, or P40. So I'm going to switch over to Microsoft Excel 2003 and I'm going to show you the actual difference between relative and absolute cell references. So in Nick's example, let me just a second here. Okay, so in this example in Excel 2003, I have a worksheet that's open, and in this column I'm going to explain to you what a relative cell reference is, and in this column it will be an absolute cell reference. So basically this worksheet is going to take the cost of an item, whatever that may be, and it's going to multiply that item by a certain tax rate, which is listed up in this row right here. It's going to calculate what that amount is, and then this column here called total will add column C and whether or not and it'll add the amount of taxes that it was calculated with. So basically in this column I'm going to have a relative cell reference. So up here in the formula bar you could see the formula is going to equal C4 times D2. It's not an absolute cell reference because it doesn't have dollar signs in front of the column and the row. So basically what this is doing is taking the value in C4, which is right here, column C, row 4, and multiplying that by the value that's in column D, row 2, as you can see by this formula. So it calculates the value, which in this case is going to be 8 cents. But now if I copy this relative cell reference down to the next row, as you can see, it changes the cell reference, which is now going to be C5 times D3. Well, as you can see from here, there's an error in the calculation, and the reason is because it's taking the contents of cell C5, which is 255, and multiplying that by the contents of D3, which in this case the value of D3 is just a text, which is taxes. So it's taking a number times the value in this cell, which is taxes, the string taxes, and it's obviously gonna come up with an error. So again, to go back to my definition, when you take a relative cell reference formula and copy it to another cell, it's gonna change the formula. Now let's go to an absolute cell reference. An absolute cell reference by definition means that the formula will not change once you copy it to another cell. In this case, I'm going to take, in this case, I'm taking column C4, column C, row 4, multiplying it by the contents of E2. In this case, E2 is equal to 6%. So what this is going to do is going to take $1.25 times 6%, and it's going to equal 8 cents. Now what's going to happen now if I copy this cell reference, which in this case is an absolute cell reference, down to the next row? As you can see, the second part of the formula does not change. It will always stay E2 no matter how many rows I copy that down to, because of the fact that E2 is now an absolute cell reference. Because what I want to do in this spreadsheet example is I always want to take the cost of the product and multiplying it by the same tax rate, which is going to be 6%. So when I copy this absolute cell reference down to the next row and multiple rows, it will change the first part of the formula, because the first part of the formula is not an absolute cell reference, it's a relative cell reference. Because in this case, the cost of the product is going to change per row. So I always want to take each product and multiply it by the same rate. So that's why I don't want this formula to change for the second part of the formula in this instance. So now for entering relative cell references, and there are two ways that you could do it, either for an existing formula or for a new formula. If I wanted to put a new formula into this cell, of course I'm going to precede it by an equal sign and take a row, which is a column, row, cell reference, which in this case is going to be B6. And now, what if I want to change B6 to an absolute cell reference? All I have to do is press F4, and as you can see, it puts dollar signs in front of the column and dollar signs in front of the row number. And if I continue to press F4, it will give you the option of changing the absolute cell reference for either the column or the row or both. The default will be once you press F4, it will always put the dollar sign in both the front, both in front of the column and the row. As you can see, it changes now back to the column, and now if I press F4 once again, it changes it back to a relative cell reference. Now, to change an existing formula in a cell from a relative to an absolute, all you have to do is select the cell that you want to work with, press F2 on your keyboard to enter into the Excel edit mode, and then you can press F4. As you can see, as I hit the F4 key, it will give you all the options of changing the formula to an absolute cell reference of your choosing. Okay, so I hope this explanation of absolute and relative cell references makes it more clear to you what they are and how you could work with them in Excel. Look for future videos on my Excel training. I want to thank you for stopping by and watching this video tutorial today on Excel absolute and relative cell references. Have a good evening, and I'll see you next time. This is Keith All. Bye for now.